River, I swear if you do not stop complaining, I will turn you into food and eat you myself. Cloud growled loudly at his younger brother, very annoyed with antics. The two had been lost for days, but within good reason. These two pups had become runaways, running for their life from the very pack they had been raised in. Cloud was currently trying to hunt, or at least mimic what he learned from watching the older warriors. But it was so much harder than he had thought, especially with his younger brother constantly complaining. It made it hard to focus. "But I'm hungry, Cloud." River looked at Cloud with his large, round eyes, pleading. River was a mastermind at guilt-tripping his older brother, especially with those large puppy eyes. Cloud sighed heavily and felt guilty for snapping. "Listen, River, I'm sorry, but I'm not that good at hunting. I'm trying, but it's really hard when you're talking. I can't focus. Maybe you could be quiet? It would help." River thought about his older brother's words for a minute, and then silently nodded his head. From this moment, he would keep his mouth shut, as promised. Cloud thanked him and tried to once again mimic what he watched. He lowered his snout to the ground and took a deep sniff. The scent of earth and mud filled his nostrils. It was hard for him to differentiate anything. He growled, annoyed heavily by this. How did they do this? Cloud kicked the ground in frustration. River looked up at Cloud and cocked his head, wondering why his older brother seemed so mad. "Can I try, Cloud?" River asked naively. Cloud squinted down at the little fluff ball and huffed. There was no way he could see his little brother being able to do this, but he didn't think it would hurt to try. "Sure, whatever. Go ahead," he allowed. Little eyes lit up in excitement, and he jumped off the ground and bounded over to his bigger brother. He looked up at him, expecting instructions, and Cloud looked down, hesitating. So you put your head down and sniff the ground," he told him slowly, cautious of his own words. River followed his instructions and put his nose as close to the ground as possible and inhaled deeply through his nose. Almost immediately, he sneezed loudly, spitting dirt and mucus out with such force that Cloud wouldn't believe it. He smirked, amused. "Not that close, I think, and not that deep of a sniff. Try to close your eyes like you're smelling the flowers," he re-instructed. River nodded and focused, imagining he was in a field of flowers. He then gently sniffed the earth before him. Many wonderful smells flowing into his nostrils, much better than dirt. He could smell the forest and the earth, but one thing in particular stood out to him. "I smell something weird. It's different," he mentioned Cloud. Cloud scoffed and looked at him with skepticism. "No, you don't," he muttered under his breath. River questioned what he said, and Cloud shook his head. "Sure, now you follow that smell," he rephrased louder than his first words. River, excited, hopped after the scent, following it. He just could not contain his excitement. This was fun. The two continued on, until eventually they came across a rocky cliffside. The stench of the scent River had smelled was much stronger here. Even Cloud got a whiff then. His ears perked up, and his stomach growled as he imagined what his little brother possibly sniffed out. However, the more he smelled, the more concerned he became. Something seemed off. "What do you think it is?" River asked as he looked around. The odd scent seemed to be everywhere here. His eyes traversed over the cliffside, finding odd holes along it. The closest one also happened to be the biggest. Cloud also noticed this and immediately stopped River from advancing farther. Something was definitely off. This scent wasn't prey. As this realization hit him, a large shadow loomed over the two small canines. Shivers of fear ran down their spines, and as they looked behind them, a loud screaming roar almost burst their eardrums. It was a predator. River and Cloud looked at each other in fear. Right in front of them was an extremely large brown bear. It was standing up on its hind legs, ready to maul the pups. Cloud grabbed River by the scruff and pulled him as he was paralyzed with fear. "River, please run!" Cloud howled frighteningly. Upon hearing the fright in his brother's voice, River was also motivated to run, and the two dashed out of the way, just barely dodging a vicious attack from the large bear. The two turned and ran for their lives, screaming at the top of their lungs. The large beast behind them seemingly not giving up on its chase. Desperate for a puppy lunch, the two ran the fastest they ever ran in their lives, barely evading the bear and his gnarly teeth. River could feel himself running out of stamina, his tiny legs unable to keep up with his older brother. Eventually he began to fall behind. Cloud noticed and grabbed his younger brother, helping him keep pace. The two ran until Cloud, with River in its mouth, was sent tumbling down into a ditch. The action sent River flying. With a yelp, he hit the ground, stunned. Fortunately, the bear was too focused on Cloud to target the small pup, and was tearing away at the ditch the Cloud had managed to hide himself even farther back in. Adrenaline pumped through his veins, and he had forgotten all about his younger brother. As death was inches away from his face, mauling at the door, Cloud closed his eyes, ready for fate to take him. River forced himself off the ground, struggling to breathe from the impact. He watched in horror as the bear got closer and closer to his older brother, ready to have himself lunch. River could not stand to watch, and felt he must do something to protect his older brother. So he began to unsteadily wobble towards the bear. At least if Cloud was going to die, he would die with him. Suddenly, a brown figure dashed by him. With a loud, angry snarl, River stumbled back, once again falling. He shook his head and watched in shock as a sudden stranger threw himself at the bear, latching his jaws onto the bear's neck and never letting go. The bear was shocked at the sudden attack and immediately forgot about Cloud, who was still cowering in the ditch, his eyes still shut in terror of death. The bear roared again and swung its arms around in an attempt to grab the stranger, but he was smart enough to find a way onto the bear's back, out of reach of its dangerous claws. The bear began to grow more frustrated and threw its body around, hitting tree after tree, only finding that the stranger managed to evade the impacts. When that didn't work, the bear body slammed him into the ground. It knocked the air out of him. The bear used this moment to draw his claws forth and slice him up. But shockingly, he was able to gather enough stability to roll out of the way. As he did so, he raked his claws along the side of the bear, deep enough for it to affect its current manner. The bear roared in pain, its attention now focusing more on its newly gained wound. Now it seemed to know that this would not be an easy meal, and because of this, took off in the opposite direction. With a loud growl, the stranger was standing there snarling still, his ears flattened against his head with glare that could kill. River was almost scared, but knew that he had just saved their lives. He ran over to Cloud, who was still in the ditch, whimpering with his eyes shut. Jumping onto him and licking his face all over, River was just glad he was safe. "I'm so glad you're okay, Cloud. We got saved. We are okay." He reassured his bigger brother, nudging him in an attempt to calm him down from his shivering state. Cloud slowly opened his eyes, looking everywhere until they landed on River's face. He was in disbelief that they were indeed still alive. He had no idea what happened until his eyes landed on the strange male wolf that seemed to be approaching them. Cloud immediately jumped out of the ditch in front of his younger brother in a protective stance. This stranger saved them, but that didn't mean he was safe. It could be a scout sent to hunt them down by their old pack. Cloud growled at the stranger as he halted only a few feet in front of them. River looked up at Cloud confused and tilted its head. "Come now, is that a way to treat someone who just saved you?" the male asked in a deep, scruffy voice. Cloud hesitated. He did not smell of their old pack, and he was fairly tired of defending, so he softened up. "I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else." "Thank you," he replied, uncertain of the stranger's name. "My name is Orion, and I am glad to have been of help." "Where are your pack, young ones?" he asked bluntly, knowing that these two must have come from somewhere. Orion noticed that these two pups seemed to be on their own, because the stench of their pack was so faint he could hardly tell. The bigger one, who was still only about half his size, stepped forward, his demeanor changing once again. "We will not speak of such. I am Cloud. This is River. He is my younger brother, and we have just been wandering around." He explained no further. Orion nodded, understanding, and before he could speak again, the smaller pup jumped forward and spoke. "Hi, I'm hungry. Do you have any food?" River asked Orion, his wide eyes innocent. It seemed he was not as affected as his older brother was from the attack. After all, Cloud had gotten the most of the scare. Cloud could not believe his ears as his brother seemingly begged this newfound stranger for food. Cloud nudged River quite hard. "Manners, River," he hissed under his breath. Orion chuckled at the two pups, and then looked around. It would not be safe to keep staying here. He knew a better spot, temporarily at least. "Follow me. There is a creek not too far away, but far enough from this bear den you somehow managed to find yourself by." Orion flicked his tail in direction of the caves that were set in the cliffside. "We can eat some food when we get there as well. That is, if you are willing to come with me," he stated simply. The two pups looked at each other, the two each with different mindsets. River grinned and hopped excitedly. "Oh, can we please?" he asked Cloud, who was once again unable to resist saying no to him. "Oh, okay, but if you try anything, we are leaving," he stated, staring directly at Orion. Orion nodded reassuringly and then led the two off back toward where he had caught himself some fish. It was easy food and a safe place. Cloud hesitated and then followed Orion slowly, still gathering his nerves from the surprise grizzly attack. At all times, he kept himself between Orion and River in an attempt to establish some sort of safety for his younger brother. But his efforts were in vain as River continuously jumped ahead, bombarding the newfound stranger with questions. "So who are you? Like, where did you come from? You totally freaked that bear out with those moves." River hopped excitedly, half stumbling as he focused on walking backwards, so he could gather every detail from Orion. Orion chuckled at the young pup's enthusiasm. "I enjoy your energy, young one. It has been a while since I've had some company. You see, I lost my pack, and I am looking for them. Surely you youngsters also have a reason for being on your own?" Orion tilted his head wonderingly. He knew the older one was reluctant to his presence, and so therefore was more suspicious of him. With that in mind, he focused on conversation with River, hoping that Cloud would ease up by the time they reached their destination. Cloud mumbled something under breath that was not heard by either of them, and sighed. He did not like how quickly Orion got comfortable with them. It irked him, but he kept his mouth shut. His eyes remained focused on the path ahead and, of course, River, who was still bouncing on his paws. Talk about energy. He never seems to run out. Cloud thought to himself, jealous he was unable to feel the same. After all, the shock from just minutes ago had still yet to wear off. Seeing how comfortable his little brother had gotten with the already familiar stranger, Cloud sighed and told himself that maybe for once he would allow someone else to take the lead. Soon they would finally be able to rest.